Does a career in advertising sound interesting? Would you like to learn more about the roles that you can explore in this industry? Stay tuned as we go deeper into this subject. Welcome to the Zista Podcast, where we invite industry speakers and academicians to answer questions that students have within a specific subject area. Today, we're going to be focusing on advertising, and joining us is Vigyan Verma. Vigyan has over 25 years of experience. He has dealt with brand management, advertising, digital marketing, business development across a wide range of products and industries. Industries like personal care, luxury beverages, fashion retail, food, healthcare, consumer technology, and yes, he's worked with a lot of B2B brands as well. Some of the notable brands that he's worked on include Lifestyle, Van Heusen, Nike, Britannia, Acer, and Black Dog. He has over 2 decades of experience with organizations like JWT and DDB Mudra. He's also worked with a Scotch startup called Mason and Summers in a marketing role. More recently, Vigyan has started his own consultancy called The Bottom Line. And, it's something that he enjoys doing. He loves working with brands and giving them good advice. So without further ado, let's dive straight into this session. Thank you for joining us on the podcast, Vigyan. We're delighted to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here, Raman.
Okay. Vigyan, I thought we'll start by asking you, to talk about your journey in advertising. What really drew you to advertising?
See, it's when you start off your life, especially when you're looking at your career, a lot of things are not very clear to you. Right. But gradually over a period of time, you figure out that, these things make sense now, right? So I'm assuming that a lot of you who are in the audience today, listening to this and watching this, would be at a stage where you're far away from really defining your career. We're at a stage where you're really exploring your options, and you should be probably thinking that, what should I do? And this stage, what are my options that I should be looking at? Should I be looking at a career in it's in engineering, a lot of things happening on the technology front, or should you pursue medicine, surgery, a lot of things happening on the technology. Is it about data science? Is it about corporate law, right? So this is the time that you should really think about what are those things which really interest you. The reason I'm putting this, from a perspective, and I'll talk to how it relates to me as well, because there's a common point. I think I'm watching it from your point of view, right? As a listener and as a watcher, what are you going to pick out of this conversation? So the thing to do is to make some understanding of what are those influences that really drives your interests. Right? So it's about trying to figure out, are you someone who's wanting to make a dent in the world of science? Is that, or are you looking at building a great product? Are you looking at building a great, an innovation? So that could be one stream of understanding that you have. Is it something that you are deeply interested from the point of view of getting into some sort of a research mode? So that's our stream that you could be thinking about. Similarly, you could be pursuing, you could be looking at, maybe there is, you find that you would want to take your interest in some form of art or sports at a professional level, right? So that's another area that you may be thinking about. Right? So that's another thing. As somebody who is looking at advertising, or was thinking of advertising, or is looking at a career in marketing at a very broad level, one of the signals that I got, when I reflected back, as a child, I was deeply interested in the world of brands. I can remember bits of advertising from my childhood. I can remember packaging designs from my childhood. And I'm talking about when I would have been like 5 or 6 years old. Now, I'm just thinking that if some of these things have made an impression on you at a very early stage in your life, then there's a decent chance that you have a natural inclination to some of these things, which is about the world of brands, the world of design, the world of advertising, the world of communications. So these things, if they have made some impression on you, then probably that's a good enough signal for you to consider and explore. I'm not saying that you should jump into it. It's absolutely okay to have multiple interests, and people do end up getting confused at a stage when they are probably just out of school or getting into the 11th or 12th or early graduation courses that they do. It is absolutely all right, because a lot of people stumble into advertising after a few moves. So it's absolutely fine. So if you discover it a little later, but I'm just saying, what are those signals to recognize? And I'm saying that it's good to think of whether these make an influence, whether you're intuitively watching out, looking out, discussing with people, having conversations with your friends, and are you making notes? Do you have a point of view? Do you feel when you see a piece of communication, does it move you? Does it create an impact? Do you disagree? Which is okay, absolutely, yeah, okay. Do you feel in some way impacted? You feel having a conversation? You feel like sharing a piece of content? You feel like figuring out how this works? Have you done a little bit of a deeper inquiry? These are some of those things which should be in somebody's minds. And I would say a lot of these I would relate to in my own experience, that maybe I was thinking a lot, maybe I was reflecting on that, maybe, and as careers progressed, one found a way into this sort of a profession. So after my graduation, I did my MBA, and I chose marketing. But I felt that this was the passage to the world of brands and brand building. And while my first job was completely unrelated to the world of branding and advertising, I eventually found my way pretty soon into the world of advertising. And the reason why I looked at advertising is it gives a fairly comprehensive perspective of the world of marketing and you're at a very, very basic level.
Oh, and I think that does help students, because initially when you do choose, it's your choices, it's your interests that really determine which way you're going. And that's a good starting point as any. And life is unpredictable. From the things that I've observed in my own career, or from the career of others around me, sometimes life doesn't pan out the way you exactly plan it. But life has this unique knack of somehow nudging you in the right direction and making sure that you reach where you're supposed to be. So I find that really amazing in some sense. But starting with your interest is rock solid advice, Vigyan. Vigyan, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the different roles and career paths within advertising. Now, if you look at it from a student's perspective, they may have different interests, they may have different strengths. So how would they determine which role would be most appropriate for them?
Yeah, it's a good question to think about. As the second step, I think, and the progression of your line of questioning is also right in that sense. So if you want to think of advertising at a very broad level, I would think maybe there are 4 distinct zones that we can talk about today.
Sure.
And it's also understand that this is something which is rapidly changing. So what I'm saying today may not be absolutely relevant in a few months or maybe a few years down the line. But as things stand, there is this whole bunch of advertising, which is the so-called conventional advertising. These are large agencies which exist today. They have their wealth of knowledge and experience in giving shape to large brands, right? So when you think of brands like Coke or Pepsi or Nike or any of these large brands, are serviced by large agencies who have the experience of working on large clients with large mandates. And these are large agencies. So let's call them the big or the commercial advertising agencies. Now that's one stream. And I'll say that the advantage of going into some of these agencies is that you get a very holistic perspective of what the world is. You get to work with some of the bigger brands, so that's a great, perspective to clean, right? The second stream would be getting into, and okay, let me just add to. So a lot of people may not be familiar with what that would include. So that would include, creating content and the content creation comes from strategy, right? From strategizing around the brand, how the brand should be positioned and how it should manifest itself through various forms, whether it is packaging design or whether it is a pieces of communication on television, on digital, or wherever that you may find, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram. So this entire bunch of big level thinking and big scale execution is where the conventional advertising agencies come into the picture. That's one part, right? The second part is something which is increasingly very, very vibrant, very, very active, and I see a lot of action and a lot of entry into the space of digital marketing or digital advertising, right? And here one could look at getting into either content creation per se, or handling, let's say, advertising campaigns on Google or Instagram or any of the social media channels. So that's one part. Or one could look at, it could also be about website content development. Right? So we get into, or mobile apps, creation of mobile apps and development of mobile apps. So some of these, when I talk about content development, we can also talk about or website doing SEO, which is search engine optimization, so this entire gamut of services on the digital side, which makes brand vibrant in the digital space, right? It's visible, vibrant, searchable, and very, very interactive. So this entire spectrum is seeing a lot of action. Is probably something which is developing in the last 10 years, and increasingly a lot of people are getting into the space, right? And because it's a new field, it doesn't have legacy people, right? It doesn't have that legacy heritage, which is a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that it leads to a lot of experimentation. If I were to say that what would be the pitfalls of it, the pitfall probably is that it is still evolving. So there are no hard, unlike the conventional advertising, a lot of things have been developed after a lot of, so there's a lot of certainty about what you do. This is fairly experimental, right? What works at some point may not work. So you have to be constantly evolving. You have to learn a lot. It's about being on your toes, experimenting a lot. And maybe from a mentorship perspective, you have to really reach out a lot, right? You have to really seek the best. Some of them may be in your team, maybe, but you have to really reach out and do a lot of learning across platforms. And for your digital, the medium itself comes into play, and try to understand from practitioners across geographies, learn. So this is a field which is extremely dynamic, very, very exciting if you ask me, and it needs special skills. Some of these skills can also be a little technical. Let's say if you are building a website, so these may actually move into slightly technical roles. But if you were to talk about the conventional advertising or even the digital agency part, which is the second part that we're talking about, some of them could be to do with the digital advertising per se, which is still kicking in the realm of brand. But some aspects of this could also take you into zones which are a little bit technical, like western development. So that's the second stream that one could look at. The third stream is getting onto the media side, right? So we spoke about the first stream, which was conventional advertising agency. The second is digital agencies, and the entire ecosystem. The third is media agencies. Media agencies are those agencies which are entrusted with the job of deploying client money into the right media vehicle. Right? So these are these typically would require somebody to have a fairly robust sense with numbers, because of course the number crunching happens through the Excel sheets, but at the end of it you got to make some sense out of it, and so that's one part of it. The other part is also looking at spotting opportunities, negotiation skills, because you're dealing with, let's say, large television channels, etc. So this entire bringing scale to the brand, getting them the right things, getting them the right media mix. So essentially, the job here is to ensure that the brand gets, the investment behind the brand is in the most optimum way. That's the job of a media planner or media agency, to deploy it in the most fruitful manner and to give the best return out of that investment. And this is handled by a bunch of people who are in a media agency. So that's the third part of an advertising overall, advertising ecosystem, if I could say. The fourth, the fourth stream would be the entire gamut of people who are involved in the content production, whether it is film production, which when I talk about film production, I'm talking about television commercials, or other forms of YouTube videos, which are slightly more upscale videos. It could also be animation films, right? So this, this content generation, high skill. See, today content can also be generated rather easily, and AI is playing a role in that, right? But beyond what AI can generate, there is also a need to generate content which probably the kind of content which goes into, let's say, television commercial, right? Those can't be generated by. So those are, or even YouTube videos, right? So those need certain skill sets from a production perspective. And I would say it's an adjacent field in advertising. Advertising works very, very closely with people who have this sort or skill set. And if one were to say, what would you look out for in this cases? So in this case, you should understand that if you're in charge of film production or content production, you're really not in charge of deciding the fate of the brand. Right? You're not making those calls. You're not deciding how the brand should be positioned or the kind of storyline. The only thing probably you're doing is to execute it. Execute it as per what the content team, typically at an agency or a client, is desiring. So you're giving a vision, you're giving life to a vision, right? So that's the role of the content development team or a production team. So I would say these are broadly three or four spaces that we can say. These are four spaces in the world of advertising, starting with conventional advertising. Digital agencies would be the second one. Then you have media agencies, there's a third one, and the content or production agencies as the ecosystem. An adjacent one would be a research agency, consumer research agency, but I would keep that away from this conversation. But yeah, that's another thing that typically advertising folks deal or not.
Thanks, Vigyan. That was a very comprehensive answer. And I think it will give students a fuller perspective as to what they can expect. So from conventional advertising to digital marketeers to media agencies, going on to, of course, you also have you rely on research agencies, and you also have people who are more immersed in production. And as depending upon, the size of the organization, there are different structures that evolve. There's a hierarchy that comes into play. And I can imagine that students could be associated with, say, more with the planning and the strategy part of it. Some of them could be more immersed in the actual execution, which is focusing on art and copy and coordinating with a lot of external vendors in some cases. And so it's really exciting. And the more you get into it, the more you read about it, the more you discover. So that's really interesting. Vigyan, I was hoping you could also touch upon some of the skills and qualities that would make students successful, in the field of advertising.
So if you were to look at advertising as a broad, skill set, and I would probably include marketing as a more passing field as well.
Sure, makes sense. Yeah.
Some of what I see is also relevant from advertising and marketing inclusively, right? So one of the things that you should look out in yourself is how external oriented you are. Okay. And I'm making a distinction between being an extrovert and external oriented. Although the meaning of extrovert is actually extrovert, when I say about is position and externally positioned, but the way extroverts are thought as somebody who's very, very comfortable being out in those. But I'm actually talking about somebody whose orientation is outward.
Okay.
What that means is that absolutely receptive to what's happening around you. It's like you have 1,000 antennas and all of them are activated all the time. The reason is that this is the skill set. One of the first things that one must understand when you talk about marketing or advertising is that you're talking about perspective, which is an external perspective. You have to always think from a consumer point of view, right? You have to make yourself less important in this entire conversation and to think first from consumer point of view, right? And this cannot happen unless and until you're attuned and you're thinking consumer first, right? Which means that you're always absorbing what's happening around you, whether it is in terms of music, films, whether it's in terms of craft, consumers that you see today, the kind of preferences that they have in terms of the kind of brands they consume, the kind of categories they consume. So the entire orientation, if you have, which is an external orientation, be interested in what's happening. So that's the first thing that one should look for. And that's, even when we interview people for jobs and roles, we look at people, whether they are inward oriented or whether they're external oriented. And again, just to emphasize the point, doesn't mean that you will be an extrovert in the way extroverts are supposed to be. But it's a deep interest in the other, right? Deep interest in the other, what's happening around this. So that's one trait, which is which I would say is probably one of the most important things. And that actually includes getting interested in diverse topics and trying to have a very wide array of interest as much as you can. So you develop some skill sets around that part. You know, getting a little bit more external. Coming a little bit deeper. So that's one basic orientation. The second one would be about is really about how much you feel bring to life your thoughts into some form of words or expressions, right? So it's important to have a part of view. That's the first part. It's important to have a perspective. It's also important to bring an application to that perspective. Right? So I would emphasize on both parts. One is the ability to observe, as we spoke first, the ability to an orientation to observe and articulate. Right. So you're looking out all the time. You're trying to be somebody who's very, very perceptive. Can you make some observations, make some sense out of it, and try to articulate it? So that articulation could end up being a breeze on a brand or an idea or a point of view or anything else. So at a very, very basic level, these are a few things. At a little deeper level, right? I mean, coming to a little bit more in terms of brass tacks, if you want to get into this industry, what are things that you need to have, like with any job, right? Like with any job, today most jobs are demanding, and people actually say, I've not come across somebody who says that I love 9 to 5 job. Nobody says that. People may probably, wish, and some people may wish it, but nobody says they want 9 to 5 job. Everyone says, especially when they're early in their careers, they want to say that I want to have specialist very late. I want to have something exciting every day. Advertising guarantees you all of this because typically you're working on something new all the time, right? So the comfort to deal with novelty and comfort to deal with vagueness is very, very important because you often start without knowing too much about what you're going to do. Okay? Ability to manage with probably less resources, right? And those resources could be in terms of information, it could be in terms of people, etc. So, the ability to handle a lot of chaos in life, because it's not a streamlined operation, from a perspective of, it's not like a assembly line or not factory where we'll do this. Most of the times, it's a very dynamic field. The requirements change. So you need to have a perspective which is, it's fine. I mean, ability to deal with a little bit of uncertainty, chaos. I know that sort of temperament is needed. I mean, you don't expect things to be laid out and to be perfect the way you plan it to be. So that is a very, very important aspect. And the third would be, the last point would be that as with any job, you should be happy doing it, even at, let's say, 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning, right? And the reason why I'm saying 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning, nobody wants to be doing an hard job. But if there is any job that you would want to do at 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning, this probably should be a job, because this is so exciting that you really don't mind doing it once in a while. And I'm not saying that one should do it often. And rarely it happens as the routine. It's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that this is a life which can be unpredictable in many ways, and also a lot of things that you learn on the go. There may not be even a lot of people who may be able to help you initially, but you will figure out your way. Interpersonal relationships are very, very important in this team. The ability to sort of navigate within the agency, as well as if you're a person who's engaging with clients, external stakeholders, that interpersonal skills are extremely important. So again, that orientation to be a little outwardly will help you, because then you observe what works with one person, what works with somebody else. So that entire, external orientation, trying to figure out. And as much as you want to think that things will pan out in the way that you think, it will not. So you need to have a very strong, fortitude to handle things, and be prepared for some surprises. One of us have made some mistakes, and when you're close to that time, and when you're close to it in the initial part of the career, those mistakes seem like the earth is come crashing down, right? When with a perspective of time and a little bit of a distance, you realize it is not that bad, and everybody does that. It's just that once you make a mistake, I think you should try not to repeat it. And then actually you should learn and probably pass on your learnings to other people in the due course of the time. So these would be some of the key aspects.
Wow, that was a really nice answer again, Vigyan. I think you touched upon a lot of points, and I just like to kind of summarize it for the sake of the students. So we talked about, being a sponge, being external oriented, really being open to absorbing inputs and influences from multiple sources, being able to articulate your ideas and your thoughts. So, communication skills, you're working in a team. So interpersonal skills, dealing with novelty, managing chaos, managing with lesser resources, and of course, be willing to learn along the way, always have this attitude of learning. And I think making mistakes is what makes us human, right? We grow and we learn from our mistakes. If we don't make any mistakes, we might as well be just a robot, right? But the fact that we're human, we're bound to make mistakes. And I think that's what makes life's journey interesting as well. Again, I'd like to kind of move forward in this discussion, ask you a little bit more about the emerging trends and technologies in advertising that students should be aware of, and if there's any way they can prepare for it.
So I'm guessing that these are young people, and their familiarity with technology would be quite, and so they already know a lot. I'm assuming that, and that's something that I expect young audiences today to also know. So one, of course, is that continue to stay engaged with what's happening around the world. As we mentioned earlier in this show, that we're talking about an external orientation. So obviously you're looking at what's happening in the world of technology, what's world. It's from a consumer point of view, right? As well as, for instance, today, if you speak today, right, the entire conversation for the last few months, maybe about 6 months and 1 year has been about AI, or generative AI. And the question that you probably have in your mind is it going to impact a job? What do I do when, our opportunity is going to be fewer because of AI? If AI has to do everything, what is my role? I'm going to be getting into the role, like a role possibly in a few years. At that time, we may have something which is, the path of AI, if you want to call it, right? Or something else, right? And how does one navigate the career at that point in time, right? What happens to us and what happens to people like us would be thoughts in young folks' minds, right? So the way to look at it is that what is the value that you can bring to the table? Right? There are certain things which human beings will still do, and you have to look at it from that point. There is on top of the layer of AI. This is where I would add as an individual, as somebody who's a team player, as somebody who's inspiring people. So there are a lot of things AI can't do, right? Creating good vibes, AI can't do. Relationships, AI can't do, right? Uh, Motivating people to do well and to have ambitious plans around your business is something AI can't do, right? You still need somebody to rally around you, right? I mean, it's almost critical functions still have to be done by human beings, right? Thinking of absolutely innovative stuff has to be done. And let's remember that even AI, as we all know, needs or Gen AI, for instance, needs some intelligent prompt. So it's still your job to give that prompt. So the point is, keep abreast of technology. Think of it as an ally, because it's going to be there and it's going to get more and more deep. And you guys are actually going to be meeting it in many ways, either as creators of technology or as participants or in the field of technology, users of technology. So be willing to learn as much as you can, as much as is necessary. Even if you don't make the entire sense of it, get the gist of it, and try to see where it can add value in the process. Yeah.
It makes sense, and this space is evolving at such a rapid pace that, it's while there are a lot of people who are sitting on that fence and looking at what they can maybe see a couple of months, couple of years down the line, the way it's actually going to pan out is anyone's guess, right? But recently, I was reading about how they're really working on building a neural interface between you and computer systems, so that you could communicate with the AI stack a lot more intuitively and perhaps derive more value. But then which way that goes is anyone's guess. Okay. I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, to share a personal story or lesson from your career that I think that could serve as a source of inspiration with students, who are looking at a future in advertising.
So this is my favorite one. The fact that we spoke about the changes in technology, what one has seen. And I think one should look at, if you're looking at a career in advertising. So we spoke about careers in advertising, scope, or different things that we can do. But if you were to, if you want to think of your career in a slightly longish fashion, and if you think that you have deep enough interest to survive, then it's interesting to know that you could actually be navigating a lot of things in your career. So coming back to my own story, I have a very interesting story that which is very difficult for a lot of people today to appreciate and understand, that I started my career before internet came into existence. Right? I mean, this itself is novelty for everybody who's probably watching this, content. How was it even possible to exist without the world of emails, and how do you manage to get to work? So the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of changes happen during the course of one's career. And I've seen that entire, from a media perspective, the pre-digital era. I just saw a little bit of a pre-digital, pre-internet era. I saw maybe a couple of years of it getting into work in the mid 90s, or 96, 97. And that was not the time when the internet in India. And looking at that era, which was all about, one channel, we had Doordarshan to start with, and then, media planning was pretty much predictable. It was very easy to really look at the perspectives and planning part from a media perspective, down to the opening of cable and satellite networks in India. So that was a second big change. And the third one would be the opening up of digital, in the mid 2000s. And the last few years have seen such rapid changes that today, for a lot of clients, they're all digital first clients. The emergence of B2C businesses. So one has seen the entire spectrum. And I've been lucky enough to have seen this entire change, because anybody who's probably joined the workforce in the last 10 or 15 years has not seen that change. It's interesting to note that while a lot of things may have changed, some fundamentals don't change. You're still needing to take an idea, a concept, or a product, or a piece of advertising to consumers in a way which is compelling, in a way which is convincing, and you expect somebody to take some decisions and actions out of what you say. Those things don't change. Now, whether the medium is a mobile app, and you're trying to get somebody who's placed an item in the cart and is refusing to do something about it, so you do a lot of intervention. You send some pop-ups or some mailers or some ads on the digital interfaces. So the need to influence still exists. The form or the methods of influence will change. Be ready for all the changes, but be open to seeing a lot of changes. So I've seen some changes. Another example is the fact that in my first agency, we had pitched for the digital, not even digital. We had pitched for the internet services to be launched in India, and that was something in Kuwait. And we had no idea about what internet was at that time. And I'm talking once again, 97, 98, back then, internet was not around. And we had to pitch for a digital internet. Actually, it's not a digital word. Digital didn't exist then. We had to pitch for internet services without having access to internet. And we actually looked at books. We had to buy a book, and we had to call up some of our network offices across the world to really understand the world of internet. Okay? So the point I'm making is that there will be a lot of things which you don't know, as we spoke earlier in the show as well. But you have to make do with what you have and make the best out of it, and be prepared for rapid learning in 2 or 3 weeks, from being absolutely zero to maybe some level of competence, to stand in front of the client and make the pitch presentation. That's something a lot of advertising folks do on a regular basis.
Awesome. And I think that, is something that some people will find exciting and some people may find scary, but then I think it really makes for an interesting ride, because, you want to do a good job, you want to make a good pitch, and getting familiar with that product, that service, that industry is so important. So I can totally relate to what you're saying, Vigyan. I just wanted to say thank you so much for making time to coming on the podcast. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. You've shared a lot of good qualitative information with students, which I think they're going to find handy in terms of looking at advertising, understanding a little bit more about the careers they can explore, and getting a better perspective about what they can and should expect. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Amit. It was a pleasure, and I really enjoyed the questions that you had. And I hope it does help some students who are looking at making a career. And I think it's keep an eye out, and if you enjoy doing things, if you enjoy having some excitement in your life, it's a good field to look at, consider.
Sure, I'm sure it will certainly do that. I really enjoyed this session. I think there's so much we learned from Vigyan. The fact that he's had so much experience across a wide range of industries lets him really give us a commentary on what you can expect in advertising, the roles that are there in the industry, the kind of firms that you can work with, and so much more. I hope you enjoyed this session. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube to get more content like this. And yes, you can follow us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Our handle is the Zista Podcast. Till we meet again, we'd say, stay curious.